Hey everyone, I had to add this to the front of the show because I recorded the whole thing, about an hour and 10 minutes, up to me talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark. And all of a sudden, I went to read, my wife came in to show me a dog. I got to that. Anyway, I talk about that at the end. But so I paused it, and then I went to listen back to it real quick to see where I left off, and I could barely hear myself because it wasn't going through the Focusrite. It was going uh, through my laptop mic and my laptop speaker coming out. But when I spoke into my microphone, I could hear it and everything was registering across of me talking. So I thought it was registering. So I tried to normalize or to reduce noise reduction on what was there. So I think I got rid of some of that. Still sounds like I'm in a room. It doesn't sound as close as this. So forgive me, but I wasn't going to go back and redo it because if I redid it, it wouldn't be as fresh. It would just be kind of blah. So, and I've done that before. I've done a whole show and then I went back and done it, and it's still fun. But right now, I'm, I'm still recovering, which I'll tell you about my nose surgery. So, I just want to kind of get this out. So I think it still sounds good, and it is good. So, hope you all enjoy my Rambo episode. So forgive me for the sound, but it will never happen again. I promise.
Film is a disease, Frank Capra said. When it infects your bloodstream, it takes over as the number one hormone. It plays Iago to your psyche. And as with heroin, the antidote to film is more film.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Celluloid Heart podcast. Podcast is two films brought together by one topic or theme with trivia to go with it, and there will be spoilers ahead. So be warned of that. And today's episode, which I had kept thinking about how to do it, I was going to do, something for Patriots Day. I was going to do, it's 9/11 when this episode's coming out. And then I thought, no, I'm just going to do something else, just random things. So I started thinking, then I was like, I'll do a Criterion Channel thing. Thought, no. And I thought, what's coming out? Rambo, Last Blood is coming out. So I'm like, maybe I should do like First Blood and First Blood 2. And then I was like, I'll do First Blood and I'll do Rambo from 2008. Then I started thinking, well, but they're all so kind of good to go and revisit. So maybe not 3 so much. But then I found them on Vudu, $20 for all 4. I already had 1 and 4. And I thought, what the hell? I'll buy them. I'll have them digital. That'll be good. So I bought them. So today's episode is Just Leave Me Alone. And it's First Blood and Rambo. But it's also, I'm gonna touch on the others real quick. So it's pretty much the whole Rambo franchise as of right now, up until the 20th, when the new one comes out. And he's in Dewey, Arizona. And that's where I'm at, is in Arizona, not Dewey. But Dewey's just a little bit, hour and a half, whatever it is. Anyway, some corrections from the last show. There are none. And if there is anything else that I missed or something that you might have caught from the last show that you want to yell at me about, send me some recommendations or some movies you want me to talk about. Just send them to mycelluloidheart@gmail.com. And you can also, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to me and, leave a review and all that good stuff. Anyway, so to start the show out with, what I do normally is new movies that I've watched at home or in the theaters. So some of these are rewatches, but most of them I'm trying to do lately, now that I'm older, is doing newer movies that I haven't seen. But when I was kicking around these ideas of what to do, I watched some really good films. So anyway, let's get into it. First of all, I got home the other day. Speaking of Sylvester Stallone, I had never seen I See You. EYECU from 2002. It's a big bomb, and let me take a sip of some tea. There's a big bomb, and I had heard that they didn't even know how to end it. They had to do reshoots. They had to do all this stuff. And that was when Stallone started slipping downhill. Wasn't doing, he had this big thing that had popped up with Cliffhanger and Demolition Man, and then things started to slow down. And so I got home the other day, and my wife was like, "Oh, I saved this for you to watch," because she started to watch it. And I was like, "Oh, what is it?" I go, "Oh, is this ICU on Amazon Prime?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay." And then I said, "Why did you rewind it? Was there something really good?" She's like, "No, I just thought you might want to watch it." I was like, "It's kind of bad." As I kept watching it, she's like, "Yeah, I know." So anyway, it's a serial killer type thing, and the serial killer follows him out there to this rehab center. So kind of interesting, him being a cop, washed up cop, suicidal, and all this because his wife dies. But other than that, I'd say skip it. Then on Criterion Channel, I saw Odd Man Out. They have 3 films of Carol. I'm drawing a blank on his name already. Anyway, so this director, he did Odd Man Out. He did Third Man. And there's a middle movie in there that he does that's pretty good, that I haven't watched, but I heard is very good. And it is, and Odd Man Out has, oh my God, see, I didn't do why am I not ready for this, to record this show? What the heck? Carol Reed is the director's name, and it's got, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. Now I'm going to have to write him up. And he's main actor. He's been in Alfred Hitchcock movies and whatnot. So Odd Man Out, though, is James Mason is in Odd Man Out. And then Third Man is, Orson Welles. And really cool. So Odd Man Out's from 1947. Sorry to bore everybody already. But it's these guys go on this crime heist, and I had done notes and everything for it, so maybe later on I'll touch back on that. But there's these guys, they make a heist, they plan this heist, and then they go and do it, and one of them, James Mason, gets shot and injured, and he falls out of the car, and then they have to look for him, but the cops are also looking for him while he's trying to, survive, and he's, having visions of, him going back to jail, and everybody's kind of this tight-knit community in England, and they're trying to, kind of the criminals know each other. Everybody knows each other. It's kind of really cool. That was from 47. Then The Third Man is from 1949. And I had seen this before, and it was more of a thing of like, oh, you got to watch The Third Man. So some of these movies you go, oh, I got to watch it. So you watch it, and you don't really get it. You're just like, eh. Third Man, though, this time I watched it. It was really cool. It's interesting. It's a little bit like, kind of weird. Kind of weird with, like kind of a MacGuffin type thing that doesn't really matter, but it's interesting. Then after that, I thought, maybe this is too heavy. I don't want to do this James Mason, Carol Reed thing. I just want to do something light and nice. And I said, what do I like? I like Charlie Chaplin. I love Charlie Chaplin. I should watch The Kid. Now, for anybody out there, I talked about it on my, Never Forgotten episode with Chaplin, Keaton, and Laurel and Hardy. The Kid is from 1921. Jackie Coogan is in it. Jackie Coogan was Uncle Fester in the 60s, Addams Family. And he's a little kid. He's like 5 years old, 5 or 6. And Chaplin finds this kid, and so he raises him as his own. And, well, he tries to get rid of him, of course, at first. Kind of funny. And then the cop is like, hey, what are you trying to do? And he's like, no, it's my baby. I love it. And it's a silent film. So, of course, Jason Bromley, you're out. But 1921, it's only like 52 minutes long. Very fucking good. And it's good. It's got emotion. It's got funny stuff. It's got great gags. Like, all kinds of stuff in it. So, because then they find out that he's not the father, and they need to take the boy to an orphanage. And so they try to take him, and the boy is crying, and he's upset, and he escapes from the cops, and he runs across the rooftops, Chaplin does, to get his son back, and it's really, really cool. And then it has a happy ending at the end, so it's always great. Then my wife and I went to the theater and saw It Chapter 2 from 2019, from this year. And it was really good. It was as good as the first one. I liked it. That's all I'll say. I mean, there's not much you can give away. It's just good stuff. Then I got home and I was like, you know what? I got Bohemian Rhapsody on digital. I'm going to go ahead and, watch that again. So I did, and it was really good. Of course, the time is all jumbled, but still, it's a good little thing. Then I had heard, oh, you should see Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. So what I heard from Edgar Wright. That's what I heard from Joe Merle. So I was like, oh, okay. So I watched that on Amazon Prime. It's from 1972. And it was an independent film. It reminded me of Corpse Grinders that I talked about on the last episode. Which Corpse Grinders still you should check out. So it's fun. And that's what this was. It was fun and it was interesting to go, oh, they're making a little independent film. And somebody had this vision, and they just wanted to make it, and they made it, which is cool. So I like that. So it was fun. It wasn't what I thought. I don't know what I thought. I think I thought it would have better special effects or more horror, but it was more of a independent horror movie. Anyway, then I saw The Devil's Eight, which I thought I got it from Quentin Tarantino. It was on the calendar at the New Beverly during his release of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it's made in 1969, and it's about these convicts. They break these criminals out of prison to then have them train on driving cars real fast and basically taking out these bootleggers. So they're playing like they're undercover bootleggers, and then they're taking on this bootlegging, gang. So it's kind of funny. It wasn't great, but it was fun. I like those 1969. I like those old movies. I'll watch anything. But then I had heard that I thought Joe Merle wrote me and said that Sid Haig, that he heard what happened to Sid Haig, and I was like, oh my God! Right away, I led to I thought, oh, he died. So I was really sad. And then I looked it up, and he was in a car wreck. So hopefully he'll live a little longer. But he is 80 years old, but still, he should live until 95 or something. But I watched Spider Baby from 1967, which is a really cool film. It's got Lon Chaney Jr. in it. They mentioned the Wolfman in there. It's pretty cool. I really like it. And it was a fun little film. And they said that house is still there. If you go look for that house, you can find it. The exterior, of course. The interiors were all a set. And then I saw Booksmart from 2019. Me and the wife rented that at Redbox, and it was really good. It was funny. A friend of mine, though, Robert Jones, who is in Vegas, who was on my Edgar Wright episode, he said that he's seen it 15 times. In the theater, he saw it 11 times or 12. He had that A-list thing, and he would go every week or just go sit through. And I was like, okay. So me and the wife watched it. We were like, it was good. I said I could watch it again. Possibly maybe own it, but it wasn't good enough to go watch 27 times, right away. So I was like, eh. Then also from Redbox, we rented Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019. And my wife sat with me and watched this, and I was like, I'm kind of surprised because you didn't want to go to the theater. She's like, no, but I'll sit here and watch it. I said, well, I want to watch it on 75-inch, so it'll look glorious. So we're not just sitting in bed watching a movie on the 55-inch. So she was like, okay. So we watched it, and she really got into it. She was like, oh, that's cool. And I loved it. All the fights, what I heard, all those Mothra, everybody, it's really cool. And then, when they're going to do King Kong vs. Godzilla, that'll be interesting. So, then who do you fight for? Then I was on Amazon Prime, and I'm looking for something to watch. I'm by myself. My wife's asleep next to me. And The Killing is on Amazon Prime. I've been wanting to buy The Killing, Criterion Collection, but I've been just holding off on it, waiting for the price to go down a little bit. It's $26. And The Killing is a really good fucking crime movie. I love those gritty crime movies. directed by Stanley Kubrick. It has, you know, anyway, the guy from, get it, the bomb movie, Doctor Strangelove. It's got the guy that plays the sergeant that's like going crazy in the office. Anyway, it's got him in it. Something with an R. I'm sorry. I'll get to that later. That's nobody cares. One person yelling out there. I know. I hear you. Then I saw Black Dragons from 1942. I kind of watched it. It was kind of playing in the background. It was a Bela Lugosi movie. It was pretty cool. It was from 42. It was interesting. It was like he was killing people and some crime spy stuff. Then I saw, because of what's coming on Netflix, is this Dolemite thing with Eddie Murphy, and so I remember watching Dolemite, and I didn't like it as much as I liked all the Pam Grier, all the Jack Hill blaxploitation stuff. Like, I really loved that. Dolemite, I remember going, this seems a little cheap. It was 1975. It wasn't as early in the 70s. I was like, I don't know. But I watched it this time, and it was really cool. I really like it. It's like really good. I'm probably going to watch the others of his. Because I remember just going, Dolemite sucks. But no, he's really good. And then, of course, I watched First Blood from 1982. Rambo, First Blood Part 2 from 1985. Rambo III from 1988. My wife would wake up and go, is this number 4? I go, no, this is 3 stuff. Then we went to the theaters today and saw Angel Has Fallen from 2019, of course. And that was good. It was pretty much the way the others are, It's pretty much your regular action movie. But I was thinking watching this, like, how do you have a John Wick type film that are out now? All the action has become that. When now all of a sudden it's like you're going to do action, and it's just like kind of, when you're filming it, you're like, it's kind of dead. Like, we need something more. That's what I was kind of thinking. Anyway, then we came home, took a nap, woke up, and saw Rambo from 2008, which, she watched. She was kind of looking for more dogs and kind of watching it, but she liked it. When the 50 caliber went off, which I'll get to, she was like, oh my God, I want one of those. And then after that, I had, my voodoo was still up, and she's like, let's watch Hitman's Bodyguard. So we watched that, and that's always fun, from 2017. It's a fun action movie, funny comedy, all this stuff. So anyway, that's what I have seen. Sorry that I bore some of you with that. Some of you want to hear it, and I enjoy talking about it. And let me take another sip of my tea, and we will get into First Blood from 1982. So the plot is, and now forgive me, now something else that I didn't touch on before we get to this. So I had surgery on my deviated septum, because before it used to feel like I couldn't really breathe, and I was having a hard time breathing. It felt like I was breathing at like 70%. And even though, you hook my finger up, it says my oxygen's at 98%, whatever. But it still felt like I just couldn't breathe in my nose very well. So now they did deviated septum, but plus did this terminus thing. So the middle skin that goes between my nose, between my nostrils, they moved that. That was, say, at the back, up between my eyes, that was leaning over to the left, and it was blocking one of my nasal passages, so I was only getting maybe half air in that. So they moved that, and moved the one down at my nostrils, moved that a little, so now it's all straight. My nose is still crooked, because the doctor said I must have broke my nose when I was younger, and I didn't realize it, and so my nose was crooked, and that's why it is crooked. If you look at pictures of me face on from right in front of me, my nose is crooked, and so he straightened that out, and so now I can breathe better. Today I had the stents pulled out, which is really a lot better, because I was just breathing out of my mouth, because I couldn't even breathe in my nose, just barely, and it was hard to sleep because I had to be elevated a little bit. And so they pulled the stents out today. That felt so much better, and now I have to keep flushing my nose out. I have to do all this stuff, and it's going to take a couple months, but it'll get a lot better. So I'm going to really, take care of it. It costs $1,800 with insurance, so I don't know what, maybe it's a $5,000 insurance thing. But my wife's like, don't pick at your nose, don't do anything, go by the book, do everything. I'm like, I know, honey, I get it. So, so that's where I'm at. So I'm feeling really good. But also, it is 7:30 in the morning, and I haven't been to sleep yet. I mean, I had a nap last night, you know. And so now I took all these notes, I put them all together. So if they're kind of convoluted or I'm kind of reading stupid, I'm very sorry. But here we go, because I found some good stuff, and I had a good time watching these movies, and I'll get to it all right now. So First Blood from 1982. The plot is a veteran Green Beret is forced by a cruel sheriff and his deputies to flee into the mountains and wage an escalating one-man war against his pursuers. And like I've said before, I'm not going to go too into like the stars and all that like I used to or written by. But Sylvester Stallone is John Rambo, as we all know. Brian Dennehy is Sheriff Teal. And David Caruso is in it. And the guy from Miami Vice, which I used to know his name, but you'll see him and you'll go, oh yeah, that guy. And he was in Manhunter. He showed him the house in Manhunter. It was really cool. And it was written by David Morrell, wrote the book, and then they wrote the script from that. And the book came out in like 72. Directed by Ted Kochev. And so now, under these notes, I took little, while I was watching it, I write these notes down on my phone. I usually do them handwritten, but my nose wasn't feeling good. I still had the things in there, so I was writing everything down. So, first of all, such a beautiful town. I love that town. It's like in British Columbia. It's actually called Hope. And it seems like that because Rambo's been traveling through all these towns and stuff since he's been back, whatever. He's been back for a while, you know, because the war was over in, 74? 72, 74. So he's used to people treating him this way. And he just wants to eat. All he wants, he's like, you know, can I get something to eat? And he's like, yeah, there's a diner up the road. He's like, is there anything against the law against me getting something here? And he's like, yeah, me. And he goes, why are you pushing me? And he goes, I just don't want you here. And then when he drops him off at the end of town, he's like, get a haircut and a bath, and maybe you'll be, you know, that's my advice to you. And Rambo heads back into town as the sheriff's heading back into town. And the sheriff sees him in his rearview mirror. And he goes back and is like, what the fuck are you doing? And he won't listen. And so he puts him up against the car and he searches him and finds his knife and all this stuff. And all of his friends are dead, and he just doesn't give a fuck anymore. Now he's like, fuck it. Like, I got nothing, kind of nothing to live for. And in the jail, when they have him in the jail, his PTSD is big time. And that's what I did like about this. This is before PTSD. It was still like shell shock. Maybe they knew a little about PTSD in 82. But seeing, you know, he sees the bars on the cells and on the windows, and he's kind of starting to freak out. And then when they're choking him and trying to shave him, then he's really freaking out, and you feel bad for him. And then he's got that badass escape where he fucking, you know, kicks them. And that Galt guy, God, I hate that. That guy who played Galt, I have always hated him just because of how mean he was to Rambo. It's one of those where before with Brian Dennehy, I used to hate Brian Dennehy because he was mean to Rambo. And then you see him later in FX and other movies, and you're like, oh, he's a good guy. Oh, I get in Tommy Boy. And you're like, oh, he's a good guy. Oh, I get it. Sorry, I drink more tea. And I love camping. And at this time, I used to run through the forest as if I was being chased by the cops and I was Rambo. So I'd be like, you know, me and my parents, we'd go camping with our friends, and then I'd go just wander off and go up on some rocks and like jump down the rocks and hide and try to act like I was making, you know, booby traps and stuff. And it was just really cool. And then Galt shoots at him, and they're like, you weren't supposed to shoot, you're just supposed to spot him. And Rambo jumps and hits all the branches. Like, I remember watching this in the theater, and I think maybe at school once. They played it at school, like we played it on a free day or something. And that thing of him hitting all the branches, for one, is semi-believable, where you're like, oh yeah, that would slow him down. It would hurt like hell, and he might break every bone in his body. But if you're being shot at on a mountain, you're wanting to survive. You're going to jump and try to hope that that works. And reminds me of my D&D days. When I was playing Dungeons & Dragons, I would do like crazy shit. Like, I'm going to grab my friend and we're going to jump through this window. And they'd go, why don't you just look for a door? And I was like, no. And then I'd have to roll for it. It was crazy. Anyway. And then Art Galt shoots more. Rambo throws a rock and Galt falls out of the helicopter and dies. And you're like, finally, good. But then he's, of course, blamed for it. And Rambo tells him that he doesn't want to hurt anyone. And the other sheriff shoots at him. He runs and hides. Then they find out that he is a Vietnam vet with a Congressional Medal of Honor. Teasel is his name, not Teal. Teasel is pissed. My wife was upset when he killed the dog. She was like, what was that? Because she heard the dogs like, meow. And she was like, what was that? And I go, honey, the dogs are after. He's got to kill these dogs. She was like, what? Sorry, more tea sipping. Things like he's out of ammo because whatever killed that last dog wasn't a bullet. Like, I like that. Like, those are things where you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, how cool is that? And, just, you know what I mean? Like, and then they spread out and make a line to flush him out. And then all the booby trap, that's when he starts taking out each person. And I remember one time in my backyard, I made some booby traps in the backyard when I was young. Then was worried that they might hurt my mom or dad. Like, I sharpened these sticks and I tied them to these little branches and I put the branches back and I put a little line across so when they tripped over the line, that thing would snap and stick in them. But it wasn't necessary for my parents. I was just like, oh, I'm making this. And then after you make them, you start going, oh, what if my mom and dad come out here and they hit one of these and it fucking stabs them and hurts them, then I'll be in trouble. So then I had to take them all down. I was like, oh shit, I better take these down. Then he says to Teasel that if you are the law in town, I am the law out here. Let it go or I will give you a war you won't believe. And then Colonel Troutman shows up. Sam Troutman is badass. I didn't come here to rescue Rambo from you. I came here to rescue you from him. So, and poor guy just wanted to eat. And he had to push me. Now the military is looking for him. A bunch of weekend warriors. They shoot the rocket launcher at the mine shaft and block that off. They're taking photos like Iwo Jima. Rambo makes a torch. I remember that. It was like, oh, cool. He made a torch and he found the liquid stuff. Oh, and when he fell through those tree branches, that was something else. And he pulls his little knife out, pulls the sewing kit out, and sews up his arm. And you're like, you've never seen that. Like, people would hurt themselves before and they'd just move on in a movie. This is the first movie where he actually doctored himself up. And it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it would come back later in Rambo 3 as well. And then Troutman is pretty sure Rambo is still alive, but he doesn't tell anybody. And Rambo comes right where the military is when he gets out of the cave. And he steals a truck with I don't know if it just has one M60. Like, he's like, what are you carrying? And the guy's like, M60. And it's like, just one or like 70? Like, I mean, like, you just got one truck carrying one M60? That's crazy. And my dad had this heavy-duty jack that I would hold and pretend it was an M60 because it was heavy. And I always heard, like, when First Blood first came out, people were like, no, a guy can't hold an M60 with one hand and shoot it. Like, that's impossible. Like, it's a fake gun. It's a movie. Stallone's real small. He can't do that. So I would hold this thing that must have maybe weighed, like, not 50 pounds, but maybe 30 pounds. For a little kid, it was pretty heavy. And I would hold it. And one day I was doing that, and I was playing like I was shooting, and I lost my grip, and it hit my dad's 36 Chevy and dented the front grill, like the middle part of the grill. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I was like, my dad's going to kill me. And I told him, and he took it okay, but I think it was part of like, oh, it's my son, he was playing okay. But part of it was like now, when I look back to it, like, how much is a 1936 original Chevy grill? It was a big grill. It wasn't like in pieces. It was one big grill, and I dented it. Like, what the fuck? So, and now Rambo runs a roadblock and is loose in town. Teasel's waiting on the roof of the sheriff's office. Rambo puts all the ammo and the gunpowder in the gun store and sets fire to it. Rambo sees the sheriff on the roof, shoots up the police station. He enters the police station. He shoots the sheriff through the roof. Sheriff falls into the police station, but he is still alive. And the end monologue is great. Like, people laugh. My wife even laughed when he's like, "Where's the leg?" I'm like, "Where are your legs, man? Where are your legs?" And it's just so good, though, where for Stallone to do that, like, this guy's breaking down. Like, he hasn't been able to talk to anybody about this. And now he's finally able to break down. And he breaks down to Troutman. And then he's holding Troutman, and Troutman kind of holds him to his chest. And then it cuts to him being arrested and taken to jail. And it is so great. That movie, like, alone, like, I said it about Terminator. I think First Blood, like, just First Blood by itself, good movie, solid, boom. It's awesome. But it's just really good. Now, Rambo, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, some facts about this movie. Morell named the character Rambo after a type of apple cultivated by a 17th century Swedish settler named Peter Gunnarsson Rambo. In the book, the character didn't have a first name, but in the movie, he was given the full name John Rambo. While writing the book, the author was struggling with what to name his main character when one day he had an apple as a snack. According to Morell, I took a bite of the apple and discovered that it was in fact delicious. "What's it called?" I asked my wife. "Rambo," she replied. Instantly, I recognized the sound of force. It also reminded me of the way some people pronounce the name of a French poet I'd been studying, Rimbaud, whose most famous work is A Season in Hell, which I felt was an apt metaphor for the prisoner of war experience that I imagined Rambo suffering. And more than 20, which I found cool, like Season in Hell, like that's a movie right there, like awesome. More than 26 drafts of the story were written during the decade of development, and dozens of actors signed on and dropped out of the role of Rambo, including Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Nick Nolte, John Travolta, and Dustin Hoffman. And during the jail escape scene, Sylvester Stallone broke the nose of Alf Humphreys, who played Lester, by elbowing him in the face. This is why he is seen wearing a Band-Aid throughout the rest of the film. In a strange coincidence, this is what Rambo does to a police officer in the book during the same scene. So when he kind of slides and then he elbows him when the guy's on the ground, he elbows him, he actually broke his nose, really elbowed him. And in the novel, the reason behind Teasel's resentment towards Rambo was because Rambo was a veteran of the Vietnam War, which gained a lot of attention. However, Teasel was a veteran of the Korean War, which most people had all but forgotten about at this point in time. And the knife that Rambo uses was custom designed by the late Arkansas knife maker Kimmy Lyle. The film popularized knockoff, hollow-handled survival knives and compasses in the pommel. If one thing that films try to avoid to make popular, we guess it's any type of weaponry, especially in today's highly volatile and influential climate. So that was where I remember seeing those, like Rambo knife. Like, I remember I was like, I want one. And then I got one. I have one in my closet that I take camping sometimes. And my friend, he was like, "Oh, hey, I got this knife." I was like, "Oh, cool, can I have it?" He was like, "Yeah, I bought it at Harbor Freight for like $10 or $15." I was like, "Sweet." And it's a pretty solid knife. It's pretty well made. When those first came out, you would be like, "I want a Rambo knife," and it was like, okay, $160, and you're like, "Fuck that." Anyway. Teasel keeps a series of medals in a display case behind him in his office. These medals, from right to left, are the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, and the Army Distinguished Service Cross medals. These indicate Teasel was a highly decorated Korean War hero, as both the Silver Star and ADSC are awarded for extreme valor and bravery in enemy combat. This subtext of the book was a battle of different war tactics. For this reason, this is underplayed in the film. So I thought that might have been kind of cool, but also it was still like, he just didn't like that he one-upped him, that Rambo one-upped him, even though it was totally inappropriate. That, it's like somebody asked me on my Instagram, like, is being a drifter, is that really a problem? Like vagrancy, like something where you're going to have to arrest somebody and torture them? Like, it's crazy. And this is where I talked about the movie takes place in the fictional town of Hope, Washington. However, much of the movie is filmed in the real town of Hope, British Columbia. During the filming of the movie, a truck used to store 50 odd firearms imported into Canada for the film was stolen along with the contents. So that would suck. According to Sylvester Stallone in the DVD commentary, the names of the people in Rambo's Vietnam team are actually names of the film's crew. This included makeup artist Michael Westmore and costume designer Tom Bronson. This must have been pretty cool for the crew members whose names were read out. During the scene when Rambo is being chased by police, the stuntman playing Sheriff Teasel suffered a broken back when the car launched to remarkable heights on the assisted ramp approaching the railway crossing. The vehicle landed on his chassis, injuring Dobbins, who found that he could not walk when exiting the car. So it didn't really say in there if he was ever able to walk or if he was, paralyzed for life or what. But that's, these stuntmen, it's like crazy stuff. Like, kudos to them. A scene was filmed where Rambo, whilst in the cave after dispatching Teasel and his men, has another flashback. He thinks about himself and his buddies in a bar in Vietnam being entertained by the local ladies. Rambo then takes one back to his room where they make sweet, sweet love. That scene flashes back to the present and Rambo begins to cry. Sylvester Stallone asked for a total of $3.5 million for his role as Rambo. Producers of the film, Mario Carzo and Andrew G. Vanna, told him he could have $2 million instead. The extra $1.5 million came from television sales of the film. And this was interesting. The actor James Garner was considered for the role of Rambo. However, he was a veteran of the Korean War himself with 2 Purple Hearts, and Garner didn't want to play a man who comes home from war and starts fighting cops. We can see Garner's reasoning here and really don't blame him. But what was interesting, I think it was about 1985, James Garner did a movie called Tank, where he steals a tank and goes against people and uses all his tactics from the war. So it's kind of interesting. I remember liking that movie. I should watch it again. I don't know if it holds up. Kirk Douglas was the first cast as Colonel Troutman, but pulled out at the very last minute due to script differences. He wanted to rewrite it, and they were like, no, we already got it locked down. As such, the producers had to rush to replace him. The first tried Rock Hudson, but he was recovering from open heart surgery and had to turn it down. They then offered it to Richard Crenna, who only accepted it the Friday before filming began the week after. He had to keep having his lines fed to him until he could get caught up. The filming rights to the novel were bought by Columbia Pictures at the request of producer Lawrence Turman. They cost a reported $75,000. Richard Brooks was originally down to direct the film and spent more than a year on the project, researching it and writing the script, which ended with Rambo being killed and more emphasis being put on the sheriff. However, Brooks wasn't happy with the script, and he didn't want to make the film when Columbia wanted to, and so the film fell apart. Warner Brothers tried to buy the rights from Columbia. John Calley, over at Warner Brothers, spent $125,000 trying to buy the project from Columbia. In this version of the film, Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro were discussed for the lead part. Both Rambo and the sergeant would have died, and Troutman would be allowed to live on. And after the success of Convoy in 1978, Chris Christopherson was considered to play the part of John Rambo. Many felt that the former airborne ranger would have made an excellent Rambo and hoped that his good friend Sam Peckinpah would be persuaded to direct the film. Just how many versions of the thing were planned? It may have inspired a real-life rampage, though, because, not the Peckinpah thing, but because on August 19th, 1987, a man called Michael Ryan, Michael Ryan, who was a fan of violent movies, went on a 6-hour Rambo-style violent rampage in Hungerford, England, which ended when he killed himself. It had been suggested by the media and newspaper drew parallels between Michael Ryan and John Rambo in First Blood, but there was no evidence that Ryan had seen First Blood. And that was something I touched on last time about Alfred Hitchcock saying, well, did the guy drink milk before he went on this rampage? Could have been the milk that made him kill, which is, awesome, sad, but awesome that Hitchcock can pull that around. David Morrell said that he also represented the signs of challenge of authority by university students who were younger than him. The book is also the result of several discussion sessions organized between Morrell and lecturers aimed at the select group of students who have returned from a tour of duty in Vietnam. It was estimated that there were 18 versions of the script for the movie in total. One writer who turned down the job was John Milius, who was approached in the late 1970s. However, Milius' producer Buzz Feichens eventually produced the movie after the original producer Ed Carlin died of a heart attack. And there are two possible alternate endings thought of or considered. First possibility would have been Colonel Troutman forced to shoot and kill Rambo, just as Rambo is about to shoot the injured Teasel and kill him. The other ending would have been Rambo run out of the police station in slow motion, opening fire at the police, but the police shoot and kill Rambo. In a 2011 article for Blade magazine by Mike Carter, credit is given to David Morrell and the Rambo franchise for revitalizing the cutlery industry in the 1980s due to the presence of the Jimmy Lyle and Gil Hibben knives used in the films. In 2003, Blade magazine gave Morrell an Industry Achievement Award for having helped to make it possible. And it's funny because you don't call those a certain knife, you call them a Rambo knife, which is kind of funny, I found funny. When the film was released in the UK in cinemas and on VHS, it was given the 18 certificate, even though the film wasn't extremely violent and only one person gets killed in the film. When the film was released on DVD, the British Censorship Board changed the rating to a 15 certificate. So that was interesting. Okay, now we're going to dive into this. I'm going to try to make it fast, not too fast. But so then I watched Rambo First Blood Part 2. Now this thing was, I used to love this. I used to have it on VHS, watch it all the time. It was like the best action movie ever. Does it hold up now? Not too much. Is it as cool as it was? Not too much. Is it still fun? Yes. So in the beginning, 9 years for, all he got was like 9 years for tearing up that town and everything that happened in First Blood. Because Troutman's like, well, you could either stay here for 5 more years, or you could help me with this mission and get that knocked off of your sentence. And again, the guy just wants to be like, just leave me alone. Like, what the fuck? Meets with the liaison for the government. What you chose to call hell, he calls home. And you're like, oh, that's cool. He is suited and booted, then gets hung up with his gear and has to cut himself free, including his equipment. So that was cool, where they set it up with like, we have all the state-of-the-art stuff, you don't worry, we have everything under control, this thing will do everything for you, just everything's great. And he's like, okay. And then he goes to jump out and he gets hung up. And that's part that kind of doesn't hold up, where you're like, that's just in a studio, and he's just being hit up against the wing, and it's kind of funny. And the other guy inside is like, I can't cut him loose. And it's like, yeah, you can. You can just reach right there. And if you had a knife like he does, you can cut him loose. Very simple. Anyway, it's kind of fun. And then he meets a connection on the ground. So he has to cut all his equipment away. So now all he has is a knife and the bow and arrow. I think she brings him the bow and arrow and everything, but not sure. But anyway, he meets a connection on the ground. She has dreams of a future. Before, I used to think of this part was boring. So when I watched this before, because it was like, you would buy the movie and you go to watch it and you go, oh, this is that boring part where they just talk, and she's like, oh, so what did you used to do? And he's like, I was in Vietnam, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, and you're like, wah. Anyway, but now it was a little better this time. You know, I'm an adult now, and I'm like, oh, I get it. The necklace brings her good luck, and the knife brings him good luck. She's like, what's your good luck? He goes, I guess it is. The camp is empty, or is it? She says, I thought you were only to take pictures. These are your orders. He says, no more orders. Still don't know what the other parts of my knife are used for. He used the back of the blade to cut through that barbed wire. I always remember that, like, really cool. And I've tried to use the back of my knife to do something with. It's not really sharp like that to cut barbed wire. But it was like, okay, it's cool. Then he sees the POWs and saves one. He sticks that one guy to a tree with the bow and arrow, which is cool, with the arrow. In the morning, the alarm call goes off. Then they realize, like, oh my God, the guy's missing. They're now on the boat. They're leaving. Suddenly, a patrol boat is seen heading their way. The captain of that boat puts a gun to Rambo and the girl. Rambo pulls his hidden baby knives out and stabs the guy next to him. Then he uses that guy as a shield, then uses the guy's shotgun to kill the other four. And it was pretty badass. I remember that. Like, you're like, those guys turn on him. He's like, it was a setup. And the patrol boat's still on its way. And then he, like, took all those guys out. She helps, and it was awesome. And the patrol boat unloads on them, and then they jump into the water. Rambo destroys, before he jumps in the water, he destroys the patrol boat with the rocket launcher, but then is being choked by a bad guy. Above him, now this is where it's hard to explain if you haven't seen the movie, but I had forgot about this part, and I was like, oh yeah, honey, watch this. So he's sitting there, and he's getting ready to unload on either he shot them with a rocket launcher, and he's trying to get out, and all of a sudden he gets this thing wrapped around him. He's being choked by this cord, and it's a guy that's laying above him, and he's pulling him up, and so Rambo like turns, pulls his knife out, and stabs the guy in the chest because the guy's laying flat. Rambo's like vertical, and he stabs the guy in the chest. Though that would be the roof of the boat. So if guy's on the roof, choking him, anyway, you get it. You've seen it. Rambo jumps from the boat right as the patrol boat hits and it blows up. Rambo now has the POW and is trying to make it to the chopper. When told to abort the mission, that was heartbreaking first time you see it. When they're like, no, we got to abort the mission, turn around. And Rambo's there with the guy, wanting to be saved, and the girl's there. And the helicopter sees him. The guy looks out at him and then turns around. Martin Cove just looks right at him and then flies off. And you're like, oh, motherfucker. It's just heartbreaking. And then Rambo's captured. And there was a guy that, I was going to look it up before this, but I forgot until I just read this note. There was a guy back when this came out. And then, there were the mission, those mission movies that Chuck Norris did. And this guy said, there's POWs out there, and I'm going to save them. They're in Vietnam. They're still there. I have proof. I'm going to go find them. But his problem was he made statements to every news station, to everybody. He's telling everybody. It's like the best way to do that would have been to just be quiet and go do it. And then if you find somebody, then you're like Rambo, and you're like, cool, I found somebody. So if it was true, he was so big-mouthed about it that they were probably like, fuck it, just kill them all or whatever, if that ever happened. But that's something that I remember that was just crazy, that this guy's like, I'm going to go save them. And it's like, by himself. He's like some mercenary or something. Then the Russians show up, and it's a bad guy from Beverly Hills Cop, and you're like, oh, man, I hate that guy. They interrogate him, but I think that was right before Beverly Hills Cop, maybe. They interrogate him and torch him by electrocuting him. And the girl shows up undercover as a prostitute to save him. Then one of the coolest scenes is when he says he will talk to the Americans. So they turn it on, everything. He says, Murdoch. Murdoch is all, oh, so glad to hear from you. Where are you? Then Rambo says, Murdoch, I'm coming to get you. And he grips the thing real tight. And it's like, ooh, dun-dun-dun. It's not Terminator music, but you know what I mean. Then he beats up a couple of Russians, electrocutes the other one. Then he runs with the help of the girl. He says that she will go with him to America. Then she gets killed. So all of a sudden she's like, yeah, can I come with you for the, she's all like bright-eyed and like wanting to live. And then she gets killed right away. And you're just like, holy shit, like that's out of the blue. Now Rambo's pissed and takes each Russian out one by one. In there is one of my favorite scenes where I've talked about it before in here, where Rambo's hiding in that mud wall, even though it makes no sense. Like, I'm going to cover myself with mud. I don't have a camera. I don't have a phone camera at the time to make sure that I'm all covered with mud. And then I'm going to hide in the wall and hope that this guy comes right in front of me where I'm at. If the guy never comes in front of you, then you got to expose yourself and come out of the wall and try to get him. But anyway, it's really cool. He's hiding in the wall. They show the guy's face, and then right behind him, you see Stallone's eyes open. And my wife was like, oh, I go, honey, watch this. And she goes, oh, cool. And then he, took that guy out. Then he blows shit up with his bow and arrow, even the main bad Vietnamese guy. And that guy's just waiting there. And then I said, watch this too. And he blew up. And my wife goes, oh my God. They drop a depth charge from a helicopter, which is the first time you ever saw like something like that, like a depth charge from a helicopter. You always heard it like off of a boat, into the water, or a ship. Joe Merle wants to yell at me. It's not a boat. And he jumps in the water. They're low and looking for him, and he jumps out of the water and pulls a guy out of the helicopter. Then he fights a big guy in the helicopter and kills him. The pilot doesn't want to fight and just jumps out. Rambo now has a Huey helicopter and starts blowing more shit up. He picks up the POWs as being chased by a Russian helicopter. Vietnam vets are helping. They're like shooting at people and stuff. The Huey gets hit and Rambo has to set it down. The Russian helicopter gets in front of them. It comes over this rise and sees the helicopter smoking. And he lands, and he almost lands in front of him. He, in front of them, is ready to blow them up. Rambo looks like he is passed out. Then he jumps up with a Laws rocket launcher and blows up the Russian helicopter. Then he brings the POWs back and tells Murdoch to find more POWs. Then gives the speech when Troutman is like, what do you want? And he goes, I want what they want. And everyone who went over there and spills their guts wants for our country to love us as much as we love it. And I was just like, it's so cool. And there was added words to that as I was listening, I was like, oh yeah, I messed up that speech a little bit. But anyway, it's really cool. And you got to make your lip go down a little bit so you're like Arnold. So you're like Stallone. Some facts about Rambo 2. I'll try to make this quick again. Director George P. Cosmatos, who was hired by the producers because they loved his previous movie of unknown origin, originally wanted to shoot the movie in the city of Chiang Mai in northern Thailand, which proved to be logistical and financially impossible for such a massive production. Instead, they shot the movie entirely on location in Acapulco, Mexico, because it was cheaper and closer to the U.S. Not to mention, they could stay on the beautiful beaches in the area while shooting. The Mexican jungles doubled for Vietnam, and the production cleverly inserted small details in an effort to make it seem like they were in Asia. For instance, the massive Buddha statue scene in the opening credit sequence was created entirely out of gold-painted styrofoam and shot in the parking lot of the production's Acapulco Beach Resort Hotel. It was then painted over again and used in the jungle temple where Rambo meets Ko Bao, which was a set created by the production only 10 minutes away from their hotel as well. The U.S. military base where Murdoch oversees the operation actually belonged to the Mexican Air Force, as did most of the aircraft seen in the movie. The most costly location was an actual rice paddy that was planted by the production and used during the scene where Rambo attempts to escape with the POW. The only thing that Cosmatos requested but couldn't get were native Vietnamese water buffalo. They proved too costly to import to Mexico. And in order to make up for lost days, they decided to shoot insert shots, this part's funny, and close-ups in their hotel while production got back up and running. One of these scenes was the famous suit-up scene, showing Rambo prepping the arsenal of weapons he initially takes on his mission. The influential scene has since been copied and parodied numerous times in subsequent films. So now we're going to get to Rambo 3 from 1988. I'm trying to rush through this, but I said through all four of them, so I said, hey, why the hell not take notes on them all? And number 3 I'd only seen maybe 2 other times. And so I said, well, I'm going to watch this this time. I bought it. I own it. Now I can watch it whenever I want. Am I going to? No. Okay, sorry, I had to drink more tea. So it starts with him stick fighting. So now you're like, oh, he went to he stayed there, and he's in Thailand now, and he's fighting. And Troutman asks him to help on a mission, and he refuses. And then Troutman gets captured, and Rambo volunteers to go and rescue Troutman. And the guy's like, why would you do this? And he goes, because he'd do it for me. And you're like, oh, that's sweet. And the whole movie seems like a love letter to Afghanistan. Even at the end, it talks about that. It's kind of what they did with number 4 with the Burmese stuff. And I believe because of this movie, I did an extra credit report once on Afghanistan when I was in like 7th grade or whatever. I was like, or 8th grade, whatever it was. And so I was like, okay, cool. And I think maybe I could. I was thinking about this. So he's got to plan this rescue thing. So I wrote this down. I think maybe I could plan a rescue, but getting in is easy. The rough part is after the alarms are going off. So it's always like, it's always where they make a mistake and the alarms go off. Now everybody's alerted. Now you got to fight your way out. If you do it slyly, you could sneak in, get the guy, and sneak out. Of course, you got to get the keys. He's trying all the keys, and then they show up, and they, all hell, and he's got to leave in there. And then there's a part, and this is where I was thinking about this. So there was a time in the 80s when somebody would say something cool, Arnold would say some shit, you're like, oh, it's fucking badass, like, I'll be back, like, he's coming back, like, oh my god, like, that guy goes, let me go on Running Man, and he's, lets a guy go. You said let you go. All that stuff, he's dead tired. All those kind of things, you're just like, oh, it's cool. And then when it came to Rambo 3, about 1988, was when I noticed some things in here where I was like, it's not the Rambo. It's either because the film's not as good, or you're just kind of like, oh, that's not really, So this guy says, who does this man think he is, God? And Troutman says, no, God would have mercy. He won't. And so I remember you're kind of like, oh, cool, that's cool. But also you're kind of like, I think it was the Steven Seagal shit that he would start saying that would go downhill. You would get away from like guys saying cool shit and it wouldn't happen. And then though it came back and now it's, and now it's in, John Wick, oh, are you back at work? Yeah, I'm back. And then him going, people keep asking if I'm back. Yes, I'm back. And you're like, yeah, fuck yeah. And then even tonight, it was like, oh, Michael Banyan, on that Angels Fallen, like, oh, Michael Banyan, like, he's the best of the best, and you're just supposed to be like, awesome. But, so I think it kind of had this fluid thing. You guys could write me if you disagree, but I think it used to be, and then Rambo 4, when we get to that, Rambo 4, he's more like, yeah, right on, then you're like, yeah, he's badass. And so I kind of like it, but you kind of don't. Like that, there's some parts in this Rambo 3 where you're just like, oh, come on. And even Rambo, when he's putting on his bandana in number 3, because you've seen it so much now, it's almost a parody of itself. He's become a parody of himself. And you're like, oh. And, but it was still fun. And I always remember this part where he pushes a piece of metal out of his side, opens a bullet and pours a gunpowder in the wound and lights it. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. He just cauterized the wound. So my wife and I went to Peter Jungle today, and I was like, oh yeah, honey, I forgot to tell you, he sewed his arm up in First Blood. I said, you were asleep on the third one, but remember when he fell on that piece of metal before you fell asleep, or that thing blew up, metal in him? I said, he pulled it out. I said, he poured a bullet and then, gunpowder, and lit it. And she was like, ooh, she made like a flinching, like, ooh, that would hurt. And I said, yeah, but it makes sense, right? And, oh, and something else. So, cauterized. 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 Because I was like, is it cod? C-O-D? Anyway. Just for anybody who was like, how do you spell cauterized? You never run into it. My wife was like, I think I knew because I was a nurse. Anyway, because she is a nurse. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense, right? She goes, yeah, it makes sense. But she goes, but now you're stopping the bleeding, but now you have a burn and all this other shit to deal with. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's very true. You've stopped one thing, but now you still have this secondary wound that you got to deal with. So that was funny. Anyway, and then that one ends with him and Troutman drive off. And, they talk about how they're getting soft and what are they going to do, and they don't know. And then, Richard Crenna died. And then it was, 21 years later, or 20 years later, and he would put out Rambo 4. But here's some facts about Rambo 3 real quick. The eventual director, Peter McDonald, who was originally hired as a second unit director, was given only 2 days' notice before picking up where Russell Mulcahy, the guy that directed Highlander, left off. Only portions of the footage directed by Mulcahy, or however you say his name, remain in the final film. The prospect of picking up any job, let alone a multi-million-dollar franchise with only 2 days' notice, would be extremely tough. Not only was Rambo III McDonald's debut as a director, but the $63 million production was also the most expensive movie ever made up until that point. And the plot of the third movie involves Rambo teaming up with Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan. Funny enough, the movie is mostly shot in the deserts of Israel, to combat Russian soldiers and save Colonel Troutman during the Soviet-Afghan War. The storyline attempted to continue the anti-Soviet slant of the series that began in the second installment. That is, until history stepped in. Around the time the movie was in post-production in late 1987, aiming for a May 1988 release, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev began implementing glasnost, the official easing of tensions and increased transparency between the U.S. and the USSR toward the end of the Cold War. Then, 10 days before Rambo III's release, the Soviet Union began withdrawing troops from Afghanistan altogether, deflating the main thrust of the movie's anti-Soviet premise. So I remember that might have been a little bit also of why, it didn't do good. But as a kid, I wasn't into that part. I just remember I was like, eh. And the movie currently ends with the quote, "This film is dedicated to the gallant people of Afghanistan." But when it was first released in 1988, the dedication read, "This film is dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan." The change was made because Mujahideen fighters had been linked to Al-Qaeda following the September 11th attacks. So that was that. So that was interesting. Now we're on to Rambo from 2008. I'm hoping you're all still with me. I hope I didn't bore you. The plot is in Thailand. John Rambo joins a group of mercenaries to venture into war-torn Burma and rescue a group of Christian aid workers who were kidnapped by the ruthless local infantry unit. Sylvester Stallone as John Rambo, and my wife was like, "Oh, that's the, Dexter's first girlfriend in the Dexter show." And it's directed by Sylvester Stallone. And so they have real footage of Burmese, the Burmese war, all the horrors that were going on in Burma, probably still. And the bad guys are bad, they're just evil. They're just sending people out to run across this minefield, and they blow up, and it's crazy. And once again, Rambo just wants to be left alone. They're like, "Can you give us a ride?" "No, I can't. Sorry." And when he finally agrees to take him, that pirate scene, when the pirates show up, he's like, "Be quiet," and they get past him. And then all of a sudden, the lights come on, and that patrol boat starts coming at him, and you're like, "Oh, shit." And the pirates are on the boat, and they're talking to him, and it's tense and scary. And you're like, "Oh, fuck." And then they want to take, the girl. And Rambo kills all three of them with a quick draw. Just pulls a gun out and, boom, boom, boom. Double taps them all, I think. Drops the missionaries off. Then he burns the evidence of the dead bodies. That guy's like, "I'm going to tell on you, blah, blah, blah." It's like, really? I just saved your fucking life. Okay. Burns the evidence of the dead bodies and the patrol boat. Then there's an attack on the village where the missionaries are, cutting off hands and legs and killing people, mowing down people with a .50 caliber machine gun. Then there's a montage showing John Rambo. It's a montage of all the Rambo movies, which is pretty cool. Rambo then makes a machete because that guy comes to him and tells him, "Hey, they've gotten captured. I've hired these mercenaries." And so then he goes and starts making a machete. And then he's transporting the mercenaries. And the main bad guy is a good bad guy. I love that guy as a bad guy. He's just so evil, almost like the guy, like I said, in the Chuck Norris Vietnam movies. He was bad in the second one. And then the mercenaries have no idea how badass Rambo is, and that's what's kind of cool. That's one where now you're like, that one bald mercenary is giving him shit, and "Don't give me that 1,000-yard stare. It's not gonna work. Blah blah blah." And it's you have no idea what this guy can do, what he's been up to, all this stuff. And then the boatman, they go, "No, the boatman stays with the boat. You're not going with us." And then the evil army shows up and makes bets on the runners as the mercenaries are hiding. And Rambo saves the fucking day. and then he's, Rambo tells them, live for nothing or die for something. And now they listen to Rambo. So that scene, I remember seeing that in the theater, and I think everybody loved it. Where these guys are like, they're wanting them to run back now across the rice paddies, and they're shooting at them to try to make them run. And the mercenaries are kind of afraid because they don't, if they don't kill them all, that truck will make it back to, almost Hidden Fortress, Return of the Jedi style, back to their base. So they're just waiting. All of a sudden, you see one guy get hit with like an arrow and falls down, and then it shows Rambo stepping out from behind the thing with his arrows, and he's just fucking shoom shoom shoom. He's like, better than Hawkeye, and he's just killing them all. And then it's like, then they, like I said, then they're all like, oh shit, this guy knows some shit, and then they're going after they're gonna go after the missionaries. And they all separate with a plan as you go. And one of the guards brings a young boy into the main bad guy's room, and you think like, oh, maybe they'll save that boy, but they don't. That boy got raped, and then later at the end of the whole attack, that boy just leaves the bad guy's house and just like walks. It's like, oh, poor. I was like, honey, they didn't save that boy. And Rambo saving the white girl. Rambo rips the guy's throat out. So remember when you saw Roadhouse and you were like, yeah, man, he ripped out a guy's throat. He could do that. This one made it look, I think Patrick Swayze did it kind of quick. It wasn't really like, it didn't look like it took a lot of effort. Stallone looked like it took a lot of effort. Like he could have really ripped this guy's throat out. Like, so it, a little more acting in the hand movements and everything. Yeah, it was really cool. And all the sniper stuff was cool because that 50 cal just knocking those guys like 5 feet was awesome, 5 to 10 feet. And then they find out that the missionaries and villagers have been saved, and they start hunting them down. And Rambo ties part of her blouse around his foot and ankle and decides to lead the bad guys away because they got the dogs and they're hunting them. And then he puts a claymore by the old bomb that they've talked about when they walked in, like, oh yeah, it was dropped in World War II by the British. And he puts it right there, and then that thing just blows up that whole area. It's kind of over the top. It's funny. And they capture the mercenaries at the boat. The mercenaries and the missionary. They capture everybody at the boat. And the girl and the sniper don't know what to do. Then Rambo chops the guy's head off and takes over the 50 cal. Like, she's like, what do we do? He's like, I don't know. Or he asked her, like, what do we do? And all of a sudden, like, my wife was like, I go, honey, look. And he's raising up from behind that guy. And when he's chopped his head off, my wife's like, holy shit. I'm like, yeah, I know. And chopped his head off, took over the 50 cal. And then all hell breaks loose. And my wife said, if that is what a 50 caliber is really like, I want one. I said, okay, honey, they're expensive, but okay. She goes, do they shoot that fast? I said, not the civilian type. Like, you can buy, a Barrett big bore that's like $12,000 gun that's a 50 caliber, like on the movie The Accountant, that he shoots. So you can shoot almost up to a mile away. Why you would have to, I have no idea. But it only shoots individual. In boot camp, I think everybody gets to shoot the little butterfly clip 50 caliber, and that's always fun. I can only imagine. So, and then Rambo guts the main bad guy and just like stabs him in the stomach and then pulls his knife across and just all the guts come out. And then he goes back to Dewey, Arizona. And it ends with him showing up, and it's our Rambo, and he's in Dewey, Arizona. And you're like, cool. And now it's set up for, 11 years later, they're making, the one that's coming out on the 20th. So, so after you hear this, then you'll be able to go see, the new Rambo Last Blood. But some facts about this movie. When Stallone decided to revisit the story of Rambo 20 years after the third movie, the original idea for the fourth installment, this is interesting, involved Rambo helping to rescue a woman in Tijuana, Mexico. According to Stallone, early ideas for the movie were to emphasize illegal immigration as a focal point but the idea was scrapped because he wanted to keep the character in a jungle setting. Stallone introduced the idea of setting the movie in Burma after reading after the protests that led to the events of the Saffron Revolution and the ongoing civil war conflict between the Myanmar military and Karen rebels, which he felt wasn't being properly covered in the Western media. Stallone, who directed and co-wrote the fourth movie, sought input from the Burmese people to tell their story, going so far as to cast many non-actors as extras. Moing Moing Kin, who plays the evil Myanmar General Tint, is actually a former Karen rebel freedom fighter. Because of this anti-Myanmar government perspective, the film is banned throughout the country. So that was interesting, and that was everything that I have for the Rambo series. So I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't a bunch of rambling, a bunch of too much information where you're all like, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. But it was fun. I had fun research. I had fun rewatching these movies. Does 3 hold up? No. Can you forget 3? Yeah. Should you watch it? Yeah. Go ahead and watch all 4, which I did leading up to this one now. My wife didn't watch any of them. And what was interesting with I talked about it before, these, the Ladies Guide to Dude Cinema is a podcast that I've been listening to. And it's really making me watch movies with a different eye. And they ask them on there whenever they watch a movie, then it's like, what did you think this movie was? And with First Blood, they really liked it. And they were saying that they thought it was all in the jungle, like it was just a war movie. And when I asked my wife what she thought it was, she said the same thing. She goes, I thought it was like a guy in the jungle that fights, wars. And like Rambo, like First Blood 2 was. And I was like, oh, okay. So kind of people don't expect it to be First Blood, or maybe women. And then, Rambo, and then these girls would say, because they kind of lean also towards, okay, you have this female character in Rambo, First Blood Part 2, who is just, she tries to save him. She has to dress as a prostitute to get in there. But then at the end, she doesn't help, save anything. She dies right away. And then that leads him to go do stuff. It's always a dead wife, a dead sister, a dead whatever, so they always make jokes of that. Just really interesting. And the thing that they said about Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was that Indiana Jones is probably a pedophile or whatever. So that's interesting because, he used to love Marion when she was 15 years old or something. So anyway, things like that make you think totally different about movies. And I think even they pulled my review for them. I was like, is Indy a pedophile? And and with question mark and other things. And I don't think it ever got accepted because I said pedophile. But anyway, I was making a joke. But so as you see, I figured out my problem with the sound right about this time when my wife came in to show me a new dog that she wants to get. And so I had to pause. And then I went to re-listen back, and I'm like, how come I can't hear that? And it was because it was all on built-in microphones and built-in. I could hear myself talking in my headphones when I'm talking through my microphone, and it was recording, but it was not recording from the Scarlett Focusrite. So I have never had a problem, knock on wood, until now. But I went through so much just to do that show that I'm not going to go back and redo it because it won't be as fresh. It'll be like that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like this. Put the intro, which you heard, and we're all good. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed it. I did. Check out all the Rambo movies. I got them on Vudu. Like I said, it was 20. It was 17 something with tax. It was 19. And they're all 4 of them are there. So I already had 2 of them, but now I got them double. So I got one on iTunes. I have a Rambo on iTunes, and then I have a Rambo on Vudu. So anyway, okay. So everybody, you want to rate and review my show? Go for it. That would be cool on iTunes. You want to follow me on Instagram under My Cellular Heart Podcast. On Twitter, I'm going to probably change it, but on Twitter right now, I'm For the Love of Film, number 4, The Love of Film, and or, Philip the Movie Man. So check me out there, or, of course, Facebook under My Cellular Heart Podcast. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, I'll be seeing you or whatever. Still haven't figured out a way to end the show. It's only been a year. Why would I figure that out? So there you go.